Governor Josh Stein vetoes an elections reform bill and legislation granting the Chief Justice greater powers. And a new Elon poll measures how North Carolinians view themselves politically. This is State Lines.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting PBS-NC.
Hello again, welcome to State Lines. I'm Kelly McCullen. Joining me today, Don Vaughan of the News and Observer. To her right, Senator Jay Chaudhuri of Wake County and Representative Howard Penny of both Harnett and Johnston counties. And Colin Campbell of WUNC News is in seat 4. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hey, Kelly.
How are you?
It seems slower, but then you read the headlines. It's not slower out there in North Carolina.
We had some good news this week. Lots of news, I guess. A good amount of news.
A good amount of work for you.
Yes.
For Colin. Well, Governor Josh Stein vetoed that recent election reform bill that Republican lawmakers approved, 2 or 3 weeks ago. The bill would reduce early voting days from 17 down to 10 days for primaries and runoffs. The state auditor could have launched post-election audits, and citizens could have challenged ballots up to 3 days following Election Day. Governor Stein, in the veto note, says it would cause chaos, it makes it harder to vote around for everyone, and allows sore losers a chance to overturn elections they lost. We'll start with you, Colin. No surprise this bill was vetoed. Sets the stage for that growing, I guess people are paying attention, November legislative session.
Yeah, so these legislatures not coming back to town until after the election, so that's when these vetoes could be dealt with. So none of this is going to come along in the short term. And then once you get into this lame duck session after November, it's going to be fascinating to see, particularly in this elections bill, do the Republicans have the numbers they need? I mean, the person to watch in a lot of these is Representative Carla Cunningham, formerly a Democrat, now unaffiliated, lost her primary, sometimes votes with the Republicans. She voted with the Democrats on this one. So whether she changes forces or whether there's even the numbers there to get veto overrides across the finish line in November. After the election, some folks may have lost their reelection and they might be less inclined to take time out of their life to come to Raleigh. So I don't know if they'll have, full strength in either Republican or Democratic caucuses.
Representative Penny, surprised by Josh Stein vetoing this one?
Not really. Looking around the table, I'm the youngest person who's ran for office ever since 2000 and been in lots of primaries. The thing that I hear from my colleagues on either side of the aisle is 17 days is kind of cruel and unusual punishment. And being a former county commissioner chair, we put a pencil on what it was costing us for those days that extended, particularly Sunday votings, and we found out it was costing the county a lot of money, and we were getting no return as far as people turning out. I'm a big advocate. We're a society that's trained to be at a place during operating hours, 8 to 5, whatever. So to me, 17 days down to 10. I voted the first time in 1968, where you stood in long, long lines. So we've come a long way. And remember, this is only in the primary and doesn't start till March of 27. Or primaries. It will not affect this fall's elections at all. And there's still 17 days during the general, is my understanding of the bill.
So 1968, you cast your first ballot.
Yes.
Humphrey guy or Nixon, or back then you had all kinds of choices.
Well, I had actually moved to Emporia, Virginia, and had to drive back home because I had only been there a short while and drove back home to cast my ballot. I'll never forget voting for Nixon in '72. Me and my wife stood in line for 4 hours with a baby in our arms, and he got impeached. I started questioning.
Senator Chaudhuri, I've heard this from both sides. Democrats do want more voting days, but they will say it's expensive in the primary and these runoffs. People don't show up for early voting, at least 17 days worth. But there's an appearance to it. It's good politics for the Democrats. It did appear that way this week.
Well, it's not just good politics. I think it's good public policy to make sure that voters have access to the ballots. And you're right. I mean, there was an argument that was made around expenses and around the folks that vote. But here's another statistic that was cited during the debate in the Senate, is that most of our voters decide who the candidate is going to be for their district in a primary, not in a general election, because most of the districts are either very Republican or very Democratic. We have 250,000 voters that vote in primaries, and so by reducing the number of days from 17 to 10, you're not allowing for as many voters to get access to the ballot, especially those that are working. I hope we don't have folks that are waiting in line the way that you did in 1968. But there are a couple other provisions to talk about. I mean, one is the so-called Griffin rule that basically allows for 3-day post-election ballot challenge, so challenge the ballot after the votes are counted, which on its face really doesn't seem to be fair. And then secondly, providing more post-audit authority to the state.
But the ballot would have to be in by election day or it wouldn't count, but you can challenge a legal ballot after election day.
That's right.
So
that's right.
3 days after election day is good for some things and bad for others, is that right?
Well, I think the idea that the losing candidate can challenge a ballot after the votes have been counted 3 days after the election certainly, I think, undermines the confidence that the voters have of whether their votes count or not.
Dawn, this is one issue where you hear one side, you go, okay, that sounds pretty good. Hear the other side, and that sounds pretty good too. Everybody has a point in this.
Sure, and I feel like what I'm seeing now with Governor Stein vetoing this and the debate around it is almost kind of the first of Stein's. He's almost a year and a half into his term, of the type of thing that he's been part of debates with in the past. I know we're talking about the courts bill too, and so this is more of your sort of typical partisan political fight with elections and voting between Democrats and Republicans. It's a long time until after the November election and that session, and depending on how things go, Republicans in control. Like, we'll see what the legislation is that they want to put forth beyond these veto overrides. But I do think Cunningham, Representative Nassif Majid is also unaffiliated. There's also Democrats and Republicans that may or may not want to come back to Raleigh in November, could resign early if they've lost. So a lot of this is up in the air still.
Keep us thinking until the fall. Very quickly, though, just give us a rundown. What happened on Thursday? The State Board of Elections had all those decisions to make where local county boards could not reach a unanimous decision, so the State Board gets to decide. Mainly early voting ballot locations and dates.
Yeah,
explain.
so the two controversies in these 20 out of 100 counties that couldn't get a bipartisan agreement at the county level, a lot of them was about Sunday voting. And so in most of those cases, the State Board voted also along party lines with Republicans in the majority to not have Sunday voting in some of the counties where it was contested. There were a couple where they allowed just 1 day of Sunday voting just for a few hours as sort of a compromise. That was in, I think, Lee and Rowan counties. And the other issue was around early voting locations in a number of counties where it came down to a partisan split. You saw Republicans wanted to see more early voting sites in conservative areas. Democrats wanted them in the more urban or left-leaning areas. And there was also some controversies about college campuses. Again, kind of split on that. They kept voting on campus at Western Carolina University in Jackson County, decided not to do early voting on college campuses in the Greensboro area. So mixed results on some of those issues.
Yeah, Kelly, I will say the press conference that Governor Stein had earlier this week when he vetoed the bill raised those issues. Actually had a speaker college student from A&T that talked about removing the voting sites from A&T in Greensboro, and obviously the Sunday voting was another issue. One of the things that Democrats have long argued about the bill now that we see it implemented is if when you have to require unanimity and now you have a split local board of elections on what to do with sites, it defaults into a partisan board of elections, which has done exactly what Democrats have said would happen, and that is to shut down a number of the sites and eliminate Sunday voting.
I remember when all this happened and we asked the legislative leaders, well, what's going to happen when it goes up to the State Board of Elections because they need to make a decision? Well, you get a 12-hour day for
Yeah, I mean, that meeting started at 9, didn't end until after 8 p.m. It was a long day with a lot of election officials from across the state just having to sit there around and wait for their turn to argue their side of, what their early voting proposals were going to be.
It seems with these voting laws, you can't split the baby on a compromise. I would think most people would be frustrated by that.
Yeah, even on the ones that were sort of pitched as a compromise, you saw a lot of people who are not really happy with how it shook out.
Well, we got another veto override to possibly watch for in November, or at least lawmakers on the Republican side have to consider it. The governor vetoed the bill that would have granted new powers to the state Supreme Court. It's a proposal to let the Supreme Court justices censure, possibly remove lower court judges regardless of recommendation by the state's Judicial Standards Commission. The Chief Justice could remove trial judges on the recommendation of the Judicial Standards Commission. The governor says the Supreme Court should not be removing other judges at a lower level who are, quote, elected by the people. So,
yes.
Once again, Stein says this is my reasons, and we'll hear veto it. And we're, November, here we come.
Yeah, this is another of the political fights that we've seen before. Sometimes it's executive versus legislative. Now it's versus judicial. And again, it's giving more power to your particular political party, that has control at the time, or the Chief Justice. And this one, I don't remember the exact vote when it passed, but again, this is kind of the same thing, that how this could have huge implications, and it's all going to be a matter of who comes to the legislative session in November before Thanksgiving.
And you need 3/5 of those in attendance, right, Representative?
That's correct.
People have said that this bill, why you can read about it, and the Chief Justice would get all these grand powers, as would the Supreme Court. But in practice, is it already in motion a bit, and this streamlines a process? I'm not an attorney, and I've never practiced before the Supreme Court.
Well, excuse me, I'm not an attorney either, but it's the streamline, I think, is a good word. And obviously, the legislature does not have. This will be obviously judicial branch, and I'm a firm believer in the three distinct branches, and I don't think we should be ever in the legislative. Ever in the judicial or the executive. So.
Veto is this something they would try to veto override, or does Josh Stein have a point, Representative Penny, that these lower court judges, a lot of them are elected? Why would you let the Supreme Court just pop them out of office?
Well, my understanding is they've already been under a judicial review prior to ever getting to a place that the Chief Justice has to make the decision. And I think Dawn has actually hit on it very elaborately. It's going to depend on who all shows up in their seats after the November. Whoever loses, wins, whatever shows up. I'm one of the deputy whips, so that's one of the things we do. We can't, not only the Democrats sitting in their seats, we can't the Republicans, and we see if we've got the votes either way.
60%. You are an attorney, Senator Chaudhuri. Is this more of a cleanup of policy? Are we looking under the hood of a motor? We don't understand how it works.
No, it's very clear how it works. And one, this is about protecting the independence of the judiciary, but not necessarily. But at the same time, when we talk about the independence of the judiciary, we're talking about a movement to concentrate more power with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So, as you mentioned, Kelly, a vast majority of our trial court judges are elected, and what we are doing now is allowing the Chief Justice to be able to remove a trial court judge without pay, which I think puts a lot of pressure on that judge. And the analogy that Governor Stein mentioned is we don't allow the governor to remove an independently elected member of the Council of State. How are we allowing the Chief Justice to remove a trial court judge?
Your thoughts?
I can see the merit in that discussion. And remember, all elections have consequences. So you pass a law now, you may have to deal with it down the road when the other party is in power.
Colin, statistically, people that are following the state Supreme Court, whether you like Paul Newby or not, will say, "Oh, you're giving Newby all this power." No, you're not giving. You're giving the Chief Justice his seat. We're looking into the future, and Newby's facing retirement here in a couple of years.
Yeah, so I mean, these sort of seats flip back and forth between the two political parties, and certainly if you lock this in, Republicans in the legislature might want to change it down the road, but they may, 4 or 6 years out, not have the votes to do that. So that's sort of a risk. This is going to be really interesting if it does go into law. How does it really work in practice? Because I think on one hand you have the argument of, well, if you've got a judge facing serious misconduct, maybe they're charged with a felony, most of us would agree you don't want to wait until the investigation's over. You want that person suspended and off the bench. But you see comments from House Speaker Destin Hall saying that we've got judges who are letting violent offenders out on the streets, and we need to show them their consequences. So that sort of opens the door to, does Paul Newby take people off the bench because he doesn't like their rulings, much less their actual conduct as a judicial official? So that I guess is a sort of we'll see, assuming this even becomes law.
But look, I think you could expedite what the work of the Judicial Standards Commission does in order to get to the same outcome that we need. I mean, the other thing I would just argue with you, Kelly, is it's not necessarily about the position. And I'll just use an example. I mean, I think the fact that the General Assembly has concentrated power with the State Auditor, that no other country no other state in the country has the auditor vested with power to focus on State Board of Elections, often shows that we're making decisions to concentrate power based on the partisanship of that office as opposed to what that office holder.
I mean, it can come back to bite you if you can't change it again when it swings the other way.
That's right.
What is, someone answer this question, because this is not Judicial Standards Commission. What does it do? Is it a full-time body? Does anyone know what it does in practice other than investigate judges?
Yeah, so I mean, the Judicial Standards Commission, my understanding is it's an appointed position. I do not think it's full-time. I mean, there is full-time staff, but it is charged to review the conducts of a trial judge or a judge if they believe that there's been some kind of misconduct carried out.
One of those bodies that pops up. And
and the appointments to that have been shifted more in favor of Republicans recently, too.
And you feel like you're supposed to know what all these groups do, and it's just really, you just don't, because they just kind of pop up and then they'll go away. Our next topic is on polling. Elon University is asking North Carolinians online how they identify politically. The pollsters say the takeaway is that we form voting groups for reasons other than simply our political party affiliation. So check this out. Over 3/4 of those polled in this poll called themselves both middle class and anti-racist. They're also proud to be a North Carolinian. 38% then said, I'm MAGA. 29% were Democratic Socialist, 20% were Libertarian, and 26% checked a box that said they're politically homeless. 800 people were polled, Colin. I didn't see traditional Republican. I didn't see conservative. And I didn't look at the poll. I read the releases and studied the bill or the PR reports on it. Very interesting, though. The brands, MAGA, Democratic Socialism, proud to be a North Carolinian.
Yeah, I mean, I think this sort of speaks to the sort of general takeaway that we have a very moderate state. I mean, you haven't seen a lot of the Democratic Socialism candidates that you've seen in other states pop up here in North Carolina. Roy Cooper's perceived as a moderate, didn't have any opposition in the primary for U.S. Senate from somebody further to the left than him. So I think the fact that you see low numbers for these sort of political extremes, whether it's I identify as MAGA, not only I support the president, but that's my personal political brand, is a fairly small percentage. Democratic Socialism, a relatively small percentage. Most people, I think, find themselves somewhere in the middle and maybe are not necessarily as attracted to that kind of a strong label on their political views.
Representative Penny, these polls are fun, but 29% of this state does not view itself as Democratic Socialist. There just ain't no way.
I would agree with that. I mean, I guess I was blessed to be raised in a family. My mother's family were all the old conservative Southern Democrats. My family was all the old Southern conservative Republicans. I never saw any difference on how we thought. I really did not. We didn't get to the kitchen table on Sundays and all have a big fight. We basically thought the same. The situation we're dealing with today, those two parties are no longer pretty much there. Most of the old conservative Southern Democrats have gone on to their reward, so to speak. And so a lot of cases with both parties, we've kind of put a lot of us in the middle, and I don't consider myself the middle of anything. I had the fortunate pleasure of going to Cuba in 2019 on a mission trip. And I saw communism, socialism is what it is. And you see that going on in New York City now. And I tell people, just go 90 miles off the Florida coast and you can get all the socialism you want, and you'll come back and you'll be glad that you're an American.
Senator Chaudhuri, on cable news and all these analysis shows, I mean, every Democrat's now a socialist, and I guess for the last 7 years, every Republican's been MAGA, so I guess everyone gets their turn at being labeled in some way or fashion. But is that good for discourse? I mean, people are aligning with MAGA and Democratic Socialism, at least in this poll.
Well, look, I think on the Democratic side, and it certainly nationally, I think it's a misconception that the primary electorate is more to the left, because if you look at most of the traditional Democratic voters, they tend to be older, they tend to be white, they tend to be women over 55. But I think what I find really interesting about this poll is, on the one hand, it really suggests a lot of polarization, because you got MAGA on one side and socialism on the other side. But to Colin's point, it actually shows you that there is a real adherence to focusing on economic issues, because it's about the middle class. And I would probably interpret anti-racist to mean that the public just wants the elected officials to be respectful and to be civil to each other. And I think so much of social media contributes to the polarization. Not this show, for sure. I mean, if anything, we do the opposite. But I think the poll actually shows that there's more of a desire to have respect and civility in focusing on the middle class.
Dawn, if somebody in that poll said, I'm MAGA, I'm proud to be a North Carolina, I'm middle class, and I'm against racism. So, I mean, it sort of covers.
I thought it was really interesting about the large numbers of I think that maybe one of the highest was proud to be North Carolinian. It just shows North Carolina is the best state in the country. It's nice that we all agree on that this is such a great place to live. Another high turnout answer, there was middle class, there was beach person. People like that. There's a lot of common ground. There's a lot of people
Your country,
in the world.
I think, was one of the ones. Yeah,
and I thought that there are a lot of things that a majority of North Carolina agrees on all the time. And in that middle is part of the reason why it's a politically purple state. And there's fringes on everything. You know, you can poll people on a wide variety of things and be surprised that 20, 30%, you know, believe certain things. So.
And I'm a beach person. I will go on the record to say I'm not a mountain guy. I've always been a beach guy. So
mountains for the win.
That's
where I'm headed.
Mountains for the win.
We have both. That's why we're the best state, right?
State Auditor Dave Bullock's released his findings into some operations of the Charlotte area transit system. Bullock's team says an estimated 60% of light rail riders, lesser percentage for bus riders, don't pay. Security doesn't enforce non-payment, they say. The Metro says they don't want their transit employees getting into physical altercations over it, but it could be over $5 million in lost revenue. A security audit found that 2 Charlotte police officers are the ones assigned to the, quote, Metro Transit Unit. Auditors say light rail cameras were not connected with Charlotte Police's real-time crime center when Irina Zarutska was murdered last summer. Senator Jay Chaudhuri, I wouldn't really worry about an audit of the Charlotte Metro Rail, except there is Irina Zarutska last year, and as much as campaign consultants have tried, they've pulled that woman's name through the primaries at least and into the general if they can.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I find it interesting you're asking a Raleigh legislator about issues in Charlotte.
I guess Harnett County.
But look, I'll say a couple things. I think one is I think the audit does raise issues around safety and accountability. I think 2 police officers is probably not sufficient, and I think there is the need to have additional accountability to generate revenue. But look, the other thing I will say is the General Assembly is also responsible for, can provide enabling legislation to allow Mecklenburg County to increase sales tax, which then can go into transit. So there are opportunities, I think, for the state to be a partner with the Mecklenburg County and the city of Charlotte and trying to solve this issue.
Well, raising taxes, though, I don't know how popular that's
well,
going to be.
there is a reluctance. I mean, maybe you can shift. I mean, maybe you can hold responsibility.
What they voted for. I mean, they voted for sales tax.
When I saw this topic, my takeaway is, especially what you were talking about, the people who work there not wanting to get into something with another person, is anytime you put some sort of mandate, some sort of law, is who's actually going to execute this? What are the workers that are tasked with this? What's their daily life going to be? If you have to do this, how much are you paying them? And that's kind of like my view on it.
I don't see a partisan issue, Representative Penny. This is an audit, and if I'm an employee of the transit, knowing the headlines I've seen on about the transit, I wouldn't want to get in a fight with someone on the bus or the train over a fare. I can't blame them.
I agree.
I mean,
and I'm even though I believe in the Second Amendment, all those type of things, we don't need to be arming the bus drivers and the people and whatever. So it's a safety issue. And obviously, I don't live in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area, but I'm in Raleigh obviously every day, and there's instances downtown in the Raleigh transit system. They're starting to have lots of opportunities because of transits or whatever down there. So even though we're talking about Charlotte, we've got the same opportunity possibly here in Raleigh.
And they're closing up the little walkway at the bus station
downtown Raleigh. I mean, that's the challenge, I think, for all transit systems, including here in the Triangle, is the degree to which people use that as a nice air-conditioned place to hang out versus a way to get from point A to point B. And when you get a lot of the former, that's where you start to have some problems, and it becomes a less attractive proposition for people who have cars and might consider public transit to get to work that way.
I've got about 3 minutes left. I want to touch on this last story about how D.C. Republicans are lining up behind former State House Representative Jennifer Balckom's U.S. House campaign. It's out in western North Carolina. Balckom replaced the incumbent Congressman Chuck Edwards as the Republican nominee. She's facing Democrat Jamie Ager. Ms. Balckom announced endorsements from both President Trump and U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson earlier this week. And if you're Jamie Ager, you're holding a multi-million-dollar campaign funding advantage. You're a top-tier candidate recruited by the National Democrats to seek that seat, and we're heading into the final weeks of election 2026. Representative Penny, quickly, one side has money, the Republicans got endorsements, so there's some energy on the right and a lot on the left in that race.
Well, absolutely. And the Agar family obviously is very well known in that area. Representative Balckom has done an outstanding job in the legislature. I'll say this, she's not bashful. She's rolled up her sleeves and gone to work, as we would say in the country, actually in the rural part of North Carolina. But with Hurricane Helene, she has been there. From the time she was a freshman there, she articulates things very well. Again, she will take a position. She will take a stand. She will not be intimidated if she's elected to go to Washington, D.C. I call her my friend. I serve with her on Agner, which is agricultural natural resources on the finance part. And we didn't always agree, but I found out she's somebody you can have a dialogue with, and she let her explain what's going on with her, and you can come to a compromise and work for what's best for the most people.
Got about 70 seconds. Senator Chaudhuri, endorsements, that's high-powered endorsements if you're a Republican, but money's money.
Yeah, I mean, look, two things. I would say Jamie Ager, like you said, was recruited, comes from a politically well-connected family with deep roots, doesn't have a political background, which I think is a positive thing today. I think the real challenge for Balckom is she's got to balance her advocacy for her region at the state level with the Trump administration that has arguably failed, and so I think she's going to have to juggle her loyalty to the president against the failure of the federal government.
Fair point. Don, with your last 20 seconds of this show, there are people out there saying these two candidates sound just alike, though.
Well, I don't know. That's up to them to make that pitch to the voters. I do think if Balckom is successful, that will change. There'll be two women in the congressional delegation on the Republican side, so that would be a significant change for them. But the election is finally coming quick.
All right, last word for you, 15 seconds.
Yeah, it's really hard to build name recognition when you've been elected in one county in that big of a region in a very short time. So uphill battle for Balckom for sure, but it is a conservative-leaning district.
A lot of work, a lot of sweat out there in the 11th Congressional, and a lot of fun for us to sit and watch it. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
Hope we've informed you. We appreciate you more for watching us. Email your thoughts and opinions to statelines@pbsnc.org. I'll read that email, I promise you. I'm Kelly McCullen. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting PBS NC.